Well, I'm starting a new video here, and well, we're starting off with a problem, and this is a pretty textbook welding problem, and I'll get in here and show you. I got the flashlight, and I'll zoom in. You can already see it. We have a crack in our down tube that runs from the headset down to the bottom bracket, and like I said, this is pretty darn textbook. You can see up here on the top how it cracked immediately adjacent to the weld. That's where it always cracks. Almost a good weld almost never cracks, but the metal gets fatigued from the heat and it cracks immediately adjacent to the welds. And so this is my fault. I probably overheated this thin walled tubing pretty good, and not to mention I had to weld on here twice. There was engine mounts for the little two-stroke that I welded on here. Then I cut those off. Then I came in and welded these mounts here for the big four-stroke. So I'll go around the other side and I'll show you. It's almost the entire circumference of this tube is cracked. So here's a real good shot of how metal always cracks right adjacent to the weld. You can see it from the top there, coming down over on top of this bead and around to the front of the tube. I mean, there's really only about a 1/4 inch of tube down here, down in this area, that's still held together. So I'm glad I caught this before I was riding it too much more. I didn't have a big crash or anything like that. So so if you've done any welding on your frame, go and check everywhere that you welded, because you could have a problem like this. So it's just fatigued metal, vibration from the engine. Effectively, you're doing something that this frame was never intended to do, with the torque of the motor, the vibration of the motor, and everything like that. So if you've welded on your frame, go and check it, and make sure that you don't have any stress cracks like these. Alright, as you can see, I have taken the engine out of here, and I've come in here with the angle grinder and the little die grinder, and ground out some of the weld, and more importantly the paint, to get the paint free. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to weld this back up. You can still see the crack in there and down there, and I'm just going to take it slow and try not to put too much heat in there. And so we'll get this perimeter welded, and then what I'll do is I'll make a brace that runs down the tube, something like this, to give it some more support. Alright, so I'm just taking it slow, just putting a few little kind of fat tacks on there at a time, and just trying not to heat up the metal too much, so we don't have that fatigue again. Alright, so I got the bike upside down, and I fully welded the cracked area, and it's not a very pretty weld. It's pretty fat beads. I was really just trying to make sure that I got everything, and it took me some time because I would let it cool down. I would do sort of a big fat tack, let it cool down for about 10 minutes, do another big fat tack, usually 180 degrees opposite of the other one, and just so I try not to fatigue, heat soak and fatigue that metal tube too much and get another crack like we got, like we're having to fix. So, and the only reason it's upside down is because I took the rear wheel off. I dropped it off at a local bike shop to have it trued up. It was kind of out of whack, and I tried to true it myself, but I didn't have any spoke wrenches that were the proper size, because those are big 12 gauge spokes. So I took it to a bike shop, and I'm not going to get that back for another 2 days. I can't just truing up a wheel. I don't see, you know, and they didn't look that busy, but whatever. So Anyway, now I'm going to come in here with the flap wheel on the grinder, and I'm going to grind off the weld here on the bottom, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do to brace up this tube. Alright, so I got the area, the bottom side of this tube all smoothed down with the flap wheel. I didn't get too crazy and dug in there too much. There's still a little bit of weld bead that sticks up a little bit there, and I wanted that. I didn't want to grind all that weld bead off of there. So what I'm going to do is come in here. I've got this piece of tubing right here. I'm going to cut this in half. I'm going to take half that piece and I'm going to lay it on this bottom tube and then weld it to the bottom tube just to give it some extra strength. This is a 1/8" wall tubing, which is 125 thousandths. Actually, I believe this is a 120 wall, which is just shy of 1/8", but it's real common in for like roll cages and stuff like that in cars. So true 1/8" is 125 thousandths. This is 120 thousandths, but nonetheless still plenty strong for what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm kind of going to go, I'm shooting for about 8 inches. That'll get me a good distance away from the crack, and I'm just going to be careful and try not to overheat my existing tube, and try and add some strength into this piece. Alright, so here's the little section of tube that I'm going to cut out. I got 8 inches here, and I'm only going to cut actually about 1/3. You can see there's one line there, and there's one line here at my thumb. So I'm only going to cut this tube about 1/3 of its circumference. And so just wanted to make a point here. I like to leave, especially when I'm cutting a section out of a piece of tube like this, leave yourself some room here, some extra material here on the end, so that you can either hold it with your hand or better clamp it down to the table while you're making these long cuts here with the cutting disc. So just leave yourself some material here to clamp down so this thing isn't running away on you and you're not grabbing the real hot, freshly cut part of the tube. So I got my piece cut and I got it marked out there, and that's just for grinding, getting the paint off there so I can weld on there. And here's my little, it's about 1/3 the circumference of that original tube, and it's just gonna set on there like that. And then I'm not gonna fully weld it, not gonna go all the way there, all the way there. I'll fully weld the ends and do a couple of stitch welds here along the length of the little piece of tube. And that's how I'm going to brace up this cracked area. It was cracked right along in this area. So I'll get the paint off of there, and then I'll come in and start welding on the little brace.